You listen to Steve Bunce on BBC London 94.9. It's the boxing album. We're playing a bit of a tribute tonight to Fitzroy Lodge coach and legend Mick Carney, who died last Saturday. In fact, I got one of the men who was in the room with him when he died. It was okay, he's not on a charge. He was there just comforting him and talking to him as he went. There was about 7 or 8 ex-Lodge fighters there. In fact, I went to the house about a week before, and I walked in, and Frank Maloney was there, and Guy Williamson was there, ABA champion from 1985, who kept on refusing Mickey Duff's money and kept on refusing Frank Maloney's money. In fact, every time they offered him money to turn pro, he said no, and they increased the offer. They thought he was holding out. He wasn't. Anyway, he was at the house, and then on last Thursday we had a bit of a last supper. It was obviously a little bit symbolic. We went to a fish shop, and then on Saturday about 4 o'clock he passed. And Grant, you were with him, Granty, when he passed. Now on the Thursday at the fish shop, I mean, apart from being weak and looking frown and his eyes rolling, he was still sharp. I mean, did he maintain that up to the end, Granty?
Oh, right to the end. Because before we went to the fish shop, we had, of all things, a committee meeting at the club.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It's a proper meeting.
A proper meeting, and we sort of half carried him up the stairs, put him on the sofa, he caught his breath, and he presided over the proceedings, and we made a few changes to the committee and stuff, and he was just adamant that he wanted these changes done before he went, before he went.
Nigel talked about that. He said he had some unfinished business.
Exactly.
Now, we got... we were speaking to Ron Bodie in a minute, because Ron knew Mick from about 1967 or 68, depending on how Ron fibs about his age, because he's only 42, so it makes him about 6 when he met him. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to pull up one of. I'll tell you, this guy I'm going to call up now. This guy I'm going to speak to now was one of Mick's favourite fighters, and I really mean that. I'm not just saying that because he's on the line. I'm telling you, he was one of his favourite fighters. Former multi champion. Roy Connor. Roy, how are you, son?
Hello, Steve. Nice to talk to you, mate.
Likewise. How are you?
Yeah,
are you at the gym?
Yes, we are. We've just finished the night's training.
Good.
And just decided to give you a bell just to speak a little bit about Mick. You know, how sad it is, obviously.
Well, what was your first memory, Roy? Because you were at New Addington, weren't you? Or was it New Addington before you came to the Lodge for about 15 years of age? What was your first memory, son?
Well, the first memory was walking in through those doors, seeing them 2 big rings, all the boys training. I mean, it just looked awesome. And then Mick coming over, putting his hand round my shoulder, showing me the changing room, and just helped me to fit into the club, and really being a father figure to me, basically, He always knew the right time when to put an arm around his shoulder or when to kick, up
when to stick a boot up the jacksie,
And he just had a knack for it,
That's what Granty was just saying here in between, when we had a bit of travel there. Granty was saying that if you think about it, he was mentoring and looking after kids' welfare, both in and outside the ring, years before people identified it. He was doing it before it was even identified. He was just doing it naturally.
Absolutely, Steve. Yeah, I mean, in every way, the boys that have been through this gym, whether they've been champions or not, or just fought for the club, every single one of them would say the same. He had a knack and he had a way of just, being a father figure to them and looking after them, basically. They'd come back years later, we always made them feel welcome. Yeah. And there's a saying, once a Lodge fighter, you're always a Lodge fighter. You're a family man, aren't you? Yourself, Steve.
Well, that's exactly. Well, in fact, I wrote that when I was doing a piece with David A in the summer, saying that's the bottom line. Once a Lodge fighter, always a Lodge fighter. Even if you fall out and dislike each other, which often happens.
Yep.
And then one other expression, Roy, and I'll leave you with this, is that you mentioned there are lots of kids that weren't champions. If some of them were just boxed for the club, but the bottom line is no boy was ever bigger than a club.
Never.
Under Mick, and that was also an art. Over all those years, all those champions and all those duds and all those lunatics and cranks, he did that. Listen, Roy, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I'll see you next Thursday.
Will do, mate. God bless.
See you later, son. That's Roy Connor. He was a brilliant southpaw Roy Connor. Now, Ron, I'm going to ask you about Mick now, because I mean, when you first went to the gym when you first met him, I mean, there's some discrepancy about your age. You were about 2.5 years of age, and you drove down there. So there's something wrong. Someone's fibbing somewhere along the line. So we won't. You don't have to give the year away. But
okay.
But tell us, cause how did you end up at the gym when you ended up there? How did you end up at the Lodge?
When I first came over from New Zealand, I wound up boxing for Roehampton.
Yep.
And basically, somebody saw me at Roehampton and said, "You can't box for them. You better box for Fitzroy Lodge."
Okay.
And I was taken down to Fitzroy Lodge by Tony Mancini.
Yeah.
and by a guy called Elfie Hewitt, and that's where I met Mick Carney. Mick Carney was the matchmaker then at Fitzroy Lodge before he became the chief trainer, and that I hate to admit it was 1967.
1967.
I said that very quietly, so I hope that got rubbed up.
But listen, Ron, there's nothing wrong with having 18th birthday, son. Don't worry about that. and I don't blame you. Now, I mean, you spent an awful lot of time with Mick at different, different nights.
We boxed all over the show, went all over the place, and Mick was always great with the story, very, very good at handling people, and he was noted for his wit. He was very sharp, very live, very sharp. And matchmaking-wise, he was the best matchmaker in the country, and no one will dispute that. He was absolutely spot on. Not just having guys, he could pick about where somebody looked like they had slim chance and they would win. He was very good at matching styles, not just records. There's not too many people who can do that.
Ron, will I see you next Thursday?
Yeah, definitely, Steve. I only heard today about the funeral on Thursday, but yeah, definitely.
Well, listen, Ronnie, thanks very much for your time, and you and I'll speak to you over the weekend, and I'll see you next Thursday down in Beckenham for the funeral.
You've got Grant Davis there. You've got to be careful where Grant's sitting, because when he boxed, he always wanted to box about number 8 and had to be in a certain corner. He'll tell you that, so he's probably got a special way to sit in the studio as well.
He's done well. He's managed to get something I haven't managed to get here in 7 years. He's managed to get a cup of tea made for him.
Oh, I've actually I actually wangled for him on a couple of occasions. I rubbed people's names off the board to change the belt order to get him on the number he wanted to be on. He was so super.
It was true. Ron, he always had to go out and make a few quid even when he was a kid.
Exactly.
Ron, listen, it's a pleasure to having you on, son. We'll talk to you in a minute. It's an interesting point that because people sometimes forget that Mick was a matchmaker first and foremost.
Fantastic.
And then, he was a coach and a matchmaker. But a matchmaker was really his big thing. I remember talking to Neville Cole about that about 15 years ago, and him talking about how Mick had guided him through his ABA runs. And also, I don't know if Mick ever talked to you about when he took the Canadian team to the 1972 Olympics. He took the Canadian team to the 1972 Olympics. He was the coach for the Canadian team. Terry Spinks was the coach for the Thai team, and Kenny Lynch, the singer, who was one of the chaps, was the sort of mascot for both teams. And according to him, the security at the 1972 Olympics was non-existent. Well, of course, you know what happened in the end. It turned out to be a little bit treacherous. Apparently, it was next to non-existence. In fact, Kenny Lynch, allegedly, his identity card was, if I'm not mistaken, like a Russian gymnast, a female Russian gymnast. There were no pictures back then, so anyone tells you that, they're lying through their bottom. But he did have so Kenny Lynch, for the duration of the 1972 Olympics, was called like Svetlana Vladimov or something like that. Now, good, he's a lovely fella, Kenny, but he's definitely no Svetlana. Granted, I've got one of your old muckers on the line, one of my old friends. There were many people that boxed at the gym, and as people have mentioned today, who went on to become big pros, good pros, many that went on to become nothing. Well, this guy did go on to become a very successful professional. I've got Ross Minter on the line. Ross, how are you?
Hello, Steve. I'm very well, mate. Thank you.
Good.
Very well.
You know the funeral's next Thursday.
Yeah, I'll be there, mate. Yeah, I'll see you there.
Ross, what did you think when you found out, or did had you been following the decline slowly?
Do you know what? It was one of them. I hadn't seen Mick for 13 years.
Oh yeah.
Basically, I went to the lodge, and then I left the lodge to turn pro. My last amateur fight was the lodge. I was there for a couple of years, and had a great relationship with Mick. Fantastic fella, and it was a shame because at the turn pro, obviously, people look upon amateurs turning pro. That it's sort of like let you go sort of thing, and you've got to go on and do your own bits. So Mick, basically shook my hand. Ross, good luck, best of luck. Do you know what I mean? And it great. And it was only about I think probably a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. I went down it was about 2.5 months ago, and I went down to the lodge. I was passing by, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to pop in there. And I popped in, and there was Mick standing in exactly the same position where he normally is, suited and booted up to the eyeballs, absolutely smart, as he always was, do you know what I mean? And he's standing there next to the ring, and he's looking at the boys sparring, and the gym is packed down there, and he's there, and he's just giving the odd little word of advice. And I just stood there for a little while, do you know what I mean? And I thought, there he is, so I walked over, I said, hello, Mick, and he looked over and he said, Ross Minter. And he gave me a big cuddle. He said, "Bloody, you're doing well, mate." he said, well done in your boxing, but I hear you're doing well with the promoting side, which is fine. And I just went, yeah, Mick, no, brilliant, you know, how's you, da-da-da. I obviously didn't say nothing about anything, and it was, you know, it was terrific just to actually know that it's still looked at as, you know, being well, it's still the same as it was 13 years ago.
You know, I had a great weekend once with Mick and Bill and a few fighters down in Torquay, and your dad was the guest of honour, Ross.
Right.
And your dad was there, and of course your dad knew Mick because they were both at the Olympics in 1972. Mick was with the Canadian team, and your dad was
getting... you said that, yeah.
Your dad was getting jobbed when he got the bronze, and he obviously should have walked the gold. That's neither in nor there. And I tell you what, it was amazing because your dad, right, was around Mick. I tell you, he was a totally different person. He was just like shut up and listen, and that was just like it reminded me what fighters are like when they're around the coaches. So suddenly your dad around him was it was lovely. It was. Listen, Ross.
You know, so much respect. You know what I mean? And that man, he just. You know, it was respect, and the thing is with him, no one, you know, I didn't know what was happening, and then suddenly I spoke to Ed Robinson down at one of the boxing awards, and he said, "Oh, Ross, did you know Mick was very?" I said, "Do you know what? I don't." I said, "Have you got his number?" He said, "Yeah," and he gave me the number. And do you know what? I never rang him.
Listen,
and I was gutted for that.
Let me tell you something. He won't have held that against you because there was loads of people that did call, loads of people that didn't. Ross Minter, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Now listen, I'm going to try and read out this text. It may be a bit emotional for him. It's coming. I don't even know this kid. It says, "Hi Steve, my name is Jazz Towner. I currently box for the Lodge. Mick Carney is without doubt the greatest man I've ever known. The biggest regret I have is never telling him how much he had done for me and how much he meant. Saying he was like a father does him a disservice because he has taught me more about being a man in the last few years than my own dad has my whole life." Oh, wow. Mick would find me work when I was struggling. He would write me references when applying for jobs, and I know his reference helped me get into one of the country's top film schools this year. His pride at me getting in will remain one of my... one of my most treasured memories. Training without him this week has been so hard, and I know he's and I know he's looking down, shaking his head at my sparring, but I pray that I can make him proud, and even a small fraction of the man he was. Thanks very much for that. Jazz, you choked me up on here, but that's okay. I won't hold it against you. We're going to speak now to Grant. He's here. Grant, do you know Jazz? Yeah, I know Jazz. And it's interesting he says that because, you know, the good fighter Marcus McRae. Yeah, of course. Great fighter. And I spoke to him. Lost in the ABA, great pro. Yeah, great pro from Brixton. I spoke to him last week when we was going down to see Mick, and he told me something really interesting that I never ever thought about. And he said to me, Mick, he grew up in Brixton, Marcus, you know, run with the crowd. And he said to me, Mick was the first white guy he had ever interacted with, ever. That's interesting. And at that time, he must have been about 17, 18. So Mick down that gym, that's really interesting. It just broke down every barrier. Yeah, and barrier free. Yeah. You know what? That is... Which is amazing in 20, you know, where we live now, you know, the times. That Marcus actually said Mick was the only white guy he had ever interacted with until he come down the lodge. And now Marcus, through the years of being at the lodge, he probably mixes with every, you know, like it is at the lodge, one big family, all different colours, like a Benetton advert is. Yeah, like a Benetton advert, yeah, with stolen shirts. Anyway.